It was well past midnight, and I found myself tossing and turning in bed, unable to escape the restless thoughts swirling in my head. After hours of this, I finally gave up and decided to get up for a glass of water. As I stepped into the hallway, the soft glow of light from the living room spilled into the darkness, reminding me that I wasn't alone tonight. That night was different. It was the night Logan had called me, asking me to take in his friend Ethan for a while. Ethan's life had taken a turn for the worse after his wife betrayed him, shattering the life they had built together. They had been married for years, and the heartbreak had left him reeling. Logan had begged me, "Sophia, he needs some peace. I can't think of anyone better than you to give him that." I barely knew Ethan before he came to stay with me. But hearing his story tugged at my heart. I had seen my own share of loss and heartbreak. 7 years ago, my husband Nathan passed away suddenly from a heart attack. One moment we were planning our dream home, and the next, I was left alone to navigate life. The loneliness had never truly left me, and lately it had been pressing down on me more than ever. As I approached the living room, I saw Ethan sitting quietly on the couch, watching an old romantic movie on television. His posture was slouched, his shoulders heavy with the weight of everything he'd been through. "Did I wake you up?" Ethan asked when he noticed me. His voice carried a mix of guilt and uncertainty. I shook my head, giving him a small smile. No, I just couldn't sleep. I came to get some water." Truthfully, I didn't want to go back to my empty room right away. The silence in my life felt unbearable at times, and tonight was one of those nights. "Come sit," Ethan said, motioning to the empty spot on the couch beside him. "You might like this movie." I hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. I told myself it was just a way to make the night feel less lonely. Sitting next to Ethan felt unfamiliar, but strangely comforting. The movie played on, but my mind wasn't focused on the screen. Instead, I found myself noticing Ethan's quiet demeanour, the way his fingers tapped nervously against his leg. It had been so long since I'd been this close to someone, and I wasn't sure how to feel about it. At one point, I accidentally brushed against his arm as I shifted in my seat. I pulled back quickly, apologising with a nervous laugh. "It's okay," he said softly, his tone kind. We sat in silence after that, the air between us feeling heavier somehow. I couldn't explain it, but there was something about Ethan's presence that stirred emotions I hadn't felt in years. The night eventually passed, and I returned to my room. But sleep didn't come easily. My thoughts were a tangled mess, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The next morning, I woke early and decided to sit at the piano in the corner of the living room. Music had always been my solace, and playing the piano often helped me find a sense of calm. As my fingers moved over the keys, the melody seemed to fill the emptiness inside me, if only for a little while. I was so lost in the music that I didn't notice Ethan returning from an early morning walk. He quietly stepped into the room, and it wasn't until I looked up that I saw him standing there, watching me with a soft expression. "That was beautiful," he said, breaking the silence. I smiled, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. "Thank you." He walked closer, his gaze lingering on the piano. "I didn't know you could play like that. Honestly, it's the best thing I've experienced in a while. Did you know it's my birthday today?" "Your birthday?" I asked, surprised. Ethan nodded. "Yeah, the big 4-0. "Well, then we have to celebrate," I said, feeling an unexpected excitement. "How about we have some cake and open a bottle of wine tonight?" He gave me a hesitant smile. If you're suggesting it, I guess I can't say no. As the day went on, I found myself looking forward to the evening. It had been so long since I'd planned anything remotely celebratory. When the time came, we sat together in the living room, sharing cake and sipping wine. The atmosphere was light, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. Ethan's warmth and kindness were a welcome change from the loneliness that had become so familiar to me. But as the evening progressed, I couldn't ignore the emotions stirring inside me. The way Ethan looked at me, the way he smiled, it all felt different. It was as though the walls I had built around myself were slowly crumbling. By the time I sat down at the piano again to play for him, the tension in the room was undeniable. Each note I played felt like it carried a piece of my heart, and when I glanced up, I saw Ethan watching me with an intensity that left me breathless. "You're incredible," he said softly when I finished. "Thank you for this." The days that followed felt different, as if the weight of the past was beginning to lift, little by little. Ethan and I had settled into an easy rhythm in the house, sharing meals, having conversations about everything from music to childhood memories, and even moments of quiet reflection. It was strange, almost surreal, how natural it felt to have him there. One morning, as I stood by the kitchen window sipping my coffee, Ethan walked in, his hair slightly tousled and his expression lighter than I'd seen before. "Good morning," he said with a smile. "Morning," I replied, gesturing to the coffee pot. "Help yourself. I made plenty." As he poured himself a cup, he glanced out the window. "It's a beautiful day. Do you have any plans?" I shook my head. "Not really. Saturdays are usually pretty quiet for me." "Why? Do you have something in mind?" Ethan hesitated for a moment, then said, "I was thinking maybe we could go for a drive. Get out of the house for a bit. What do you think?" The idea caught me off guard, but I found myself nodding. "That sounds nice, actually. Let me grab my things." Within the hour, we were on the road. The windows rolled down as the fresh air rushed in. Ethan had suggested heading to a nearby lake, a place he said he'd visited years ago but hadn't been back to since. The drive was peaceful, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a sense of freedom. When we arrived at the lake, the sight took my breath away. The water was calm, its surface reflecting the clear blue sky. Tall trees lined the shore, their leaves rustling gently in the breeze. It was the kind of place that made you forget your worries, if only for a while. Ethan parked the car and we walked down to the edge of the water. He carried a blanket and a small cooler he had packed with snacks and drinks. "You came prepared," I teased, raising an eyebrow. He chuckled. "I figured if I was going to drag you out here, I should at least make it worth your while." We spread the blanket on the grass and sat down, the silence between us comfortable and easy. As we shared sandwiches and fruit from the cooler, we talked about everything and nothing, our favourite books, places we wanted to visit, and even our most embarrassing moments. At one point, Ethan grew quiet, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "You know," he began, his voice thoughtful, "I didn't think I'd feel this way again. Like there's something to look forward to." I glanced at him, my heart tightening at the vulnerability in his words. "I know what you mean," I said softly. "It's not easy to see past the hurt sometimes." He turned to me, his eyes meeting mine. "But being here, with you, it feels different. Like maybe things can get better." The sincerity in his voice left me speechless. I didn't know how to respond, so I simply nodded, hoping he could see the understanding in my expression. As the afternoon turned to evening, we decided to take a walk along the shoreline. The golden light of the setting sun bathed everything in a warm glow, and the sound of the water lapping against the shore was soothing. At one point, Ethan stopped and picked up a smooth, flat stone. "Do you know how to skip stones?" he asked, a playful smile on his face. I laughed. "Not really. I've tried, but I'm terrible at it." He handed me the stone and showed me how to hold it, his hand brushing against mine as he adjusted my grip. "You just have to angle it right and flick your wrist, like this," he demonstrated, sending the stone skipping across the water in a series of graceful hops. "Show off," I teased, laughing as I picked up another stone. My attempt wasn't nearly as successful. It plopped into the water after a single bounce. Ethan chuckled. "Not bad for a beginner." We spent the next hour skipping stones and laughing like children. It was the kind of joy I hadn't felt in years, and I couldn't help but think about how different my life had been before Ethan arrived. That night, as we drove back home, the car was filled with a comfortable silence. I found myself glancing at Ethan now and then, wondering how someone who had been a stranger just weeks ago could feel so familiar. When we pulled into the driveway, Ethan turned off the engine but didn't move to get out of the car. Instead, he looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Sophia," he began, his voice hesitant, "I just want to say thank you for everything. You've done more for me than I can put into words." His words touched me deeply, and I felt a lump form in my throat. "You don't have to thank me," I said. "You've given me just as much, maybe more." We sat there for a moment, the air between us heavy with unspoken emotions. Finally, Ethan smiled and opened his door. "Come on," he said. "Let's get inside." As I followed him into the house, I couldn't help but wonder where this journey would take us. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel so uncertain, so lonely.